Yes, good morning everyone. One last discussion that we're having here on one last topic from your essay paper, and the topic that we'll take up today is the absolute last one, number 8, that just because you have a choice, it does not mean that any of them has to be right. Now, but before I look at this, again, one last time, briefly, what exactly is the structure of the essay? Simple 8-para essay that we write, which is divided into 4 parts. The first part is the introduction, your intention here to give a preview of your essay. Second part is body paragraph number 1, especially for reflective topics. This is where you express your interpretation of the topic. This is very important because if you have your body paragraph right, if you've interpreted the topic correctly, the rest of the essay will largely take care of itself. After that, number 3, 5 separate body paragraphs. In each of them, provide different perspectives, different dimensions, different analysis, arguments on the essay. And lastly, your conclusion for a final reinforcement of the topic. Keeping that in mind, let me come to this topic over here now, that just because you have a choice, it does not mean that any of them has to be right. Now, before I start looking at the introduction, the content, the interpretation, first let me understand this topic over here. A lot of people have been interpreting this topic in the strangest of manners, and it is quite clear that they themselves don't seem to be very confident about what they are saying. So first understand this, 2 or 3 points. Number 1, as I've said many times over, your essay paper has a very significant correlation, overlap with the ethics paper. It has nothing to do with an option. It has nothing to do, for example, here, the philosophy optional might seem relevant. But please remember, number 2, why do we say ethics? Because ethics is a part of general studies. General studies. On the other hand, when you're writing an essay, the intention is not to show that you're a specialist. The intention is to write with a generalist orientation. This topic, for example, says that just because you have a choice does not mean that any of them has to be right. Now, if I look at it from an ethical point of view, from a philosophical point of view also, this now is the debate between absolutism on the one hand and relativism on the other. If you are able to understand this, you're absolutely correct. But the more important question is, when I'm writing the essay, will I discuss in 1200 words absolutism and relativism? Absolutely not. If I wanted to get such an understanding from you, I would ask you the question in the ethics paper. I would ask you that question in your philosophy optional. But in the essay, which is a generalist exercise, I expect you to explain to me what would make a choice right or what would make a choice wrong. Is it possible to encounter situations where both the options are definitely right or definitely wrong, or could be considered to be either right or wrong, depending upon your context? This is the explanation that this is the understanding that I need you to convey to the examiner. 1. Second, now here when you have to give examples, and we are asking you that there are certain choices that can be right, certain choices that can be wrong, and certain choices that can be considered ambiguous, where we can't clearly tell you whether this is right or this is wrong. It will vary from context to context. Now, in the essay paper, to a large extent, the examples, the evidence that you give will add quality to your essay. But here, please do not give examples. A word that I used in one of the earlier essays also, one of the earlier videos. Please don't give an example that seems pedestrian, that seems casual, that seems that you've not put in too much effort. So don't start discussing now dietary choices. Don't start discussing lying or not lying. You can do this. There's no problem with it. Even if you give these examples, you are right. But to improve the quality of your essay, to have some standard in your essay, it would be far better if you gave us examples that are institutional, gave us examples that are historical, gave us examples that are based on some academic content. And to understand what that means, now let me try to interpret this topic here. When we say that just because you have a choice, it does not mean that any of them has to be right. How do I interpret the topic? 3 questions I ask myself. Number 1, what would be considered to be right? At any point in time, for any culture, any society, any country, what would be considered to be the right option or the right choice? And what is the right choice? The right choice would be something that promotes larger and sustainable public welfare. Any decision, any action that you take that promotes collective public welfare, larger public welfare, long-term public welfare would by most people, almost on a universal level, be considered to be right. But what will promote public welfare and the welfare of which public exactly? That brings up the second question. Why would a choice or how can a choice be considered right in one context but wrong in another? A decision that you are taking, someone else might not. You might believe that this is the right decision to take. India, for example, decides to develop atomic weapons and then nuclear weapons. Is it correct for a peace-loving country to develop weapons? India says yes, because we'll use them only as a credible deterrent. Many other countries say no. And how do we know that they disagree? Because these countries, immediately after our test in 1998, will impose upon us very strict economic sanctions. But in 1974, when we tested nuclear weapons, in response to our tests, was created an organization called the Nuclear Suppliers Group, very clearly indicating that the world was not happy. They believed that India had made the wrong choice. Your decision was not right. The same NSG today has allowed India to get access to nuclear technology, to get access to nuclear material. Why? In recognition of the fact that the decision taken by India was right, because genuinely we have a very strong record of non-proliferation. We are genuinely a country that is responsible and peace-loving. We only use it as a deterrent, not for aggression, not for threatening, not for violence. So what will decide for us? What will tell us how a decision can be right in one context but wrong in another? Now this could depend upon the context. When the cultural context, when the religious context, when the geographic context, the economic context, when the context starts changing, there the interpretation of right and wrong will also change. What is correct for the Americans might not be right for the Indians. What Indians believe to be correct, believe to be justified, may be absolutely wrong somewhere else. The Americans, for example, eat beef, but a large proportion of India, being an agrarian economy, would believe that killing a cow is absolutely wrong, is not the right decision. Indians, on the other hand, believe, especially if you consider people who go to religious places, a lot of food, a lot of milk, a lot of, what should I call them, essential nutrients are just cast away into drains. At the same time, a country in Africa might believe that this is a criminal waste of food that could have been used to feed other people. So what is right or wrong depends upon your cultural context, your religious context, your demographic context. Or number two, what is right and what is wrong, this variation can also come because of uncertainty regarding the final outcome. Whatever decision you're taking, what does this decision finally lead to? And what final outcome means, I'll take a couple of examples, I'll explain it to you over there. Third question, how do we then decide which choice would be considered universally right or universally wrong, without hesitation, without exception? How do we decide that? That any such decision must be based upon, not opposed to, must be based upon, must be aligned with fundamental human virtues. Here I will not even use the word values, fundamental human virtues. If it is aligned with them, we'll say that the decision seems to be right. If it is contradictory to them, we will say that the decision seems to be wrong. But again, the problem is that which virtue would be applicable or appropriate in a given situation, that itself might not be easy to decide. This is why, and this is what I need you to understand here, most importantly, in this topic, please ensure that your interpretation is correct. Just because there's a statement given in the topic, just because a statement is given by the UPSC, does not mean that you necessarily have to and completely have to agree with it. In a topic of this nature, for example, you should try to prove how sometimes both the decisions could be right, how sometimes both the decisions could be wrong, or sometimes one choice might be considered correct and another choice might be considered wrong. The more liberal your interpretation, the more you try to establish that balance, the better your essay will come out to be. And to understand that, now this is our interpretation, that it's not easy to tell what will be necessarily considered right or wrong in some circumstances. In other circumstances, it is absolutely clear that one choice is definitely right or one choice is definitely wrong. Now, to understand this is what I write in my body, paragraph number 1. In the introduction or the conclusion, what do I write? Now, there are n number of examples that we have, but 4 or 5 of them let me share here. One example you write in your introduction, one you write in your conclusion. For example, if I consider a person like Oskar Schindler, now Oskar Schindler has a very clear choice. On the one hand, he can save Jews. On the other hand, he can support the Nazi Holocaust. In these circumstances, the question that you are asking yourself, is there a choice that can definitely be considered right? And without hesitation, nobody on the planet can disagree with you. The right choice is to save the Jews. So the answer is yes. If I consider a person like Ashoka, the Indian Emperor Ashoka, he has a clear choice. He can expand his empire or he can embrace peace. Is there a definite right choice? And again, the answer without hesitation is yes. He must choose peace. Today we remember Ashoka. Of the countless people who have ruled India, we remember him as the great for the simple reason, not because he conquered a lot, but more importantly because he was able to establish the foundations for a peaceful future, for the kind of India, the kind of ethos that India has even today. If you look at a person such as Thomas Edison's mother, not Edison, Edison's mother. Edison's mother is told by his school that your son is mentally adult, he's mentally deficient, we cannot teach him. There's a clear choice for her. One, she can agree with the school and relegate her child, discard her child, and believe that her child will not be able to do anything. Or number two, she can have faith in the child. Is there a correct decision to take? Answer is yes. What did she do? She had faith. She taught him at home, encouraged him, facilitated him, never made him feel inferior or deficient in any manner, making him one of the greatest inventors the world has ever seen. You look at a person called General Dyer. This is Jallianwala Bagh we are talking about. Now, General Dyer has a clear choice. On the one hand, he can issue a warning. On the other hand, he can open fire. Is there a definite right choice to take? Answer is yes. And what is the right choice? Please issue a warning. Even if you believe that the Indians sitting in Jallianwala Bagh are violating or defying your rules on basic humanitarian grounds, you should understand that most of them are elderly, are women, or are children. It's a peaceful gathering. They are not doing anything that can be considered violent or oppressive. At least issue a warning. If they don't disperse, number two, then you can fire a few rounds in the air to scare them off. But what did he do? Immediately retaliated by opening fire. Is there a definite right choice? The answer without hesitation again is yes. Abraham Lincoln, he's won one election, which is his presidency. Abraham Lincoln has a clear choice. He can abolish slavery or he can allow it to continue. Is there a definite right choice? Answer is yes. Please abolish it. It is a gross violation of basic human rights, human dignity, human lives. This is why we say now, what is the topic? That just because you have a choice does not mean that any of them has to be right. But there are circumstances, 5 of them that we're looking at here, where you have a choice where very clearly we can tell you that one course of action is right and one course of action is wrong. Now here students have a legitimate doubt, or sometimes they don't think adequately. They say that, sir, all of them are yes. Can we also have some examples where there is a wrong choice? Well, all that you have to do is reverse these 5. If I look at, for example, Oskar Schindler, what would have been a wrong choice? To support the Holocaust. What would have been the wrong choice for Ashoka? To only expand his empire. What would be wrong for Edison's mother? To agree with the school. What would be wrong for General Dyer? To open, and which he did, to open fire. What would be wrong for Abraham Lincoln? To allow slavery to continue. If you want to write it in a positive manner, write it this way. You want to write it in a negative manner, just change it and look at the bad choices that could have been made or were actually made. This is what you can write in your introduction. But I also need 5 body paragraphs and distinct, separate body paragraphs. Now over here again, humans have a lot of choices to make, and in each of these choices, sometimes we can tell you clearly that one choice is right and one is wrong. Sometimes we cannot clearly and very universally make that distinction. All these examples we look at here, give 2 or 3 where it is easy to make a choice, easy to distinguish right from wrong. Give 2 or 3 examples where we cannot really tell you that one decision was definitely right or definitely wrong. For instance, every person has a choice to either forgive or to seek revenge. Now over here, is there a definite right choice? Answer is yes. As a decent human being, the correct choice is very clear always, that you must be willing to forgive. And whose example will I give you here? I can give you the example of Draupadi and Ashwathama, which we've discussed earlier. There, Draupadi chose to forgive. On the other hand, I can talk about Hitler and the Jewish Holocaust. And Hitler was wrong not to forgive the Jewish community for whatever he believed they had done wrong to the German people. In these circumstances, is there a clear choice? Answer is yes. And when Hitler takes the decision, today the world unanimously says that his decision, his choice was not correct. Similarly, we have a choice between violence or non-violence. Now here, the answer was yes, there's a definite, and maybe just highlight this word also, is there a definite correct choice? Number two, should I choose violence or should I choose non-violence? This is difficult to decide because this depends upon your ideology. This depends upon your intention. And here I can give you the example of a person such as Bhagat Singh, a person such as Subhash Chandra Bose. When they disassociated themselves from Mahatma Gandhi, both of them very clearly made a choice that Gandhi's principle of ahimsa, Gandhi's principle of non-violence might not be adequate to win independence, to secure independence for India. Bhagat Singh, in his own words, had said that violence, he towards the end of his life agreed that violence cannot be sustainable, cannot be a long-term solution. But for a major part of his struggle for independence, violence was the weapon, was the tool, was the means that he used. Mahatma Gandhi said that it is India's moral duty to support Britain in the Second World War. Subhash Chandra Bose believed that we should align with the Germans, should align with the Japanese, and use their assistance to defeat the British. Was the decision right or was the decision wrong? Nobody can tell you. So here, yes, we can't say whether a decision can be right or wrong. Similarly, when I have to make a choice from economic systems, the choice that I have is, should I embrace socialism or should I embrace capitalism? What is the right decision to take? And here again, nobody can tell you for sure. When India attained independence, we chose a mixed economy model, but primarily, that's India's economic system we are talking about, but primarily our orientation was towards socialism. Was that right or was that wrong? You will have different people, depending upon their ideology, giving different answers. Some people will say that it is the socialism that led to the Hindu rate of growth. And some people will say that no, capitalism at that point in time might have been absolutely wrong. Because the quality of our human capital in India, the quality of our social capital was very low, was very limited. Who is right, who is wrong is a matter of debate. We cannot clearly tell you which decision is right or which is wrong. Another choice that people have to make even today is to follow or to oppose social norms. Now, should I follow or should I oppose social norms? Is there a definite choice? Answer is yes. When do I follow or when do I oppose these norms? That depends upon whether these norms are just, whether these norms are fair, whether they are egalitarian, or whether they are wrong, whether they are bad, whether they are cruel. For example, when Raja Ram Mohan Roy starts his crusade against Sati, is that the right decision? Without hesitation, answer is yes. You have a choice and one of them, without hesitation, is definitely right. Neither of them is wrong. You must oppose it because that is the only way your nation and your society can progress. One final example here. Should I, in our day-to-day lives, especially for students at your age, should I support my friends or should I oppose them? Should I give my support to my friends or should I counter them? Should I disagree with them? Clear answer, oppose the friend if the friend is wrong. Here, for example, you can quote the example of Karan and Duryodhan. Karan knew that what Duryodhan was doing was wrong. You are disrobing your own sister-in-law in full public court. You are very, very toxic. You are very venomous towards. You have a lot of hatred and envy, resentment against your own brothers. Karan knew that. Had he not supported Duryodhan, probably the war could have been avoided. So here there's a clear choice that you have. Similarly, India and Russia with regard to the Ukraine war. In February, India abstained from voting against Russia. But just last month, in August, India voted against Russia. Why? Because it is very clear that even if they are long allies, long lost allies, old friends, we know the distinction between right and wrong. There is one choice that is clear, that is right, and another choice that is not. Again, and many other examples that I'm sure you'll be able to think of, many choices you can think of. But a little bit of content over here. Most importantly, please use your basic logic, basic intelligence to understand the essay paper. And let me leave you now with 3 or 4 basic guidelines. Number 1, in the essay paper, please keep it a generalist exercise. This is not a specialized exercise, and again I'm repeating this, certain optionals may be useful for the essay paper. None of them has a very strong overlap with this paper. You can borrow elements, you can borrow the understanding from those papers, but they are not needed for the essay paper. It is largely a generalist exercise. Number two, in the essay paper, your interpretation of the topic is extremely important. If you interpret the topic correctly, the rest of your essay will flow very smoothly, very comfortably. Number three, it is important to have appropriate content, diverse content, a lot of content, and content that has been organized in a systematic manner. Everyone has content. These examples that I've written here, I'm sure every student over here knows these and many more examples. The more important concern is sitting in the exam hall, will you be able to recollect all of them? Or will you make the mistake? For example, second point here, I can just write Bhagat Singh, then Subhash Chandra Bose, then Motilal Nehru, then Jinnah. But you're talking about the same point. Will you have diversity in your content? And that will only come if you're organized. Number four, it is very important that you practice writing. This is important to some extent to learn time management. It is important more importantly because this is the only way that you'll be able to improve your expression. And number five, finally, if possible, please try to get your writings evaluated, especially at the initial stages, because it is that evaluation that will help you understand where you're going wrong and what you need to do to overcome that problem or to improve upon your shortcomings. The essay paper is very simple, very straightforward if your approach is right. And for that approach, these five elements, please keep in mind. Thank you very much.